Alright, so we have our combo chart showing wage and employee trends here. But to be honest, I'm not 100% happy with it. I mean, the columns and lines do give some sense of a trend, but you also have to associate each of them with the legend and then with one of these two y-axes. Now, there are a couple of ways of making this easier to read. One of them is to simply add data labels to the second series here, and we can remove the secondary y-axis. But another, which I actually prefer in this scenario, is to split this graph into two, one for the line and one for the columns, and stack them vertically. That way you can have a separate y-axis for each along the left here, while maintaining a single x-axis that you can use for both. So let me show you how that works. Let me drag this down. And I'm going to hold Control and also Shift so that I can create a copy of this exact chart and just move it up and down in a straight line. And now let's remove the columns from this one. So I'm going to go to Select Data, remove the employees, press OK, and remove the line from this one. Alright, so we have wages here and employees here. We can get rid of the legends on each. You can get rid of the title on this second one since this first title applies for both. And we can get rid of the x-axis on this one since this x-axis aligns with both of them as well. Now I'm going to resize both of them a bit. We don't need them to be this big. Move this up. Again, let's get rid of the chart borders because it looks like I didn't do that before. Do that here as well. And it looks like we need to change the label for this y-axis here. This is actually total employees. We can add a border for the y-axis here as well. And you'll notice that in order for these to line up properly, we need to either have the labels on the y-axis be the same length, or we can just get rid of them altogether. And if we add data labels to each series, then we can get rid of them. So let's do that. Add data labels here. I'm going to go to Format the labels, and we can add a custom number format to get rid of all the digits. So maybe instead of showing 21,899,196, we can simply say 21 million. So let's try that. Go to Custom. We're not showing currency figures right now since this is total employees, so we can get rid of the dollar symbol. And if we add a comma like we have before and press Add, you'll see that that only removes one set of 3 digits. But if we add another one, let me move this over here, and press Add, now we got rid of all 6 digits. So we can add an M for millions, press Add, and you'll notice that we get a lot of repeating values here, so 22 million, 22 million, 22 million. What we can do is add some decimal points afterward for some differentiation, so we don't need to drill up into the millions that much. We can still add some level of detail, and to do that, after both of our commas in which we removed the digits, we can actually add a decimal point and tell Excel that we wanted to show 2 decimals by writing 2 zeros. Press Add, and now we got 21.9 million, 22.38 million, 22.87 million, and 22.04 million, which is much better. Let's make these bold and a little bigger. And for our columns, let's just make the gap width 85%. Again, so the space between them is smaller than the columns themselves. Now let's add some data labels to our line chart as well. Select them, and I'm going to have them appear on top of the line instead, so we can change from right to above. And once again, we can add a custom number format. We are showing currency this time, and we only need to remove one set of 3 digits, and this is going to be AK for thousands. Press Add, 48, 49, 50, and 54K. Again, make this bold, a little bigger. And just so that we know exactly where in the line these data labels fall, you can add some markers. So I'm going to select the line. And in the fill options, I'm going to go to marker, marker options, and add one of the built-in markers. I like the circles. And let's make these a little bit bigger. Maybe make them filled with white. And for the border, let's make it a little bit thicker. And I just really like that nice effect that it gives to the markers here. And now that we have the data labels on each of these charts, we can get rid of the y-axis. But before I do that, you'll notice that when I split these up, the baseline from this column chart was reset and it's no longer starting at 0. So let's change that back. In the minimum, I'm going to specify 0 and tab over to hard code it. And now that I'm here, let's think about this maximum value. As it stands, the maximum will adjust depending on the number of employees for the industry selected. So if I move over and close this and change the selection, you'll see that it'll always adjust based on the max value here. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it does help in making the trend clearer. But what it also does is create a false sense that all the industries have a similar number of employees. Because as I switch across them, or between them, even though the data labels do specify the actual number, which varies significantly, the heights appear to remain the same, which can lead you to think that the number of employees is similar. So if I wanted to compare both the trend and overall volume as I switch between industries, what I could do is fix the max value on my y-axis here based on the industry with the highest number of employees. In other words, with the tallest columns. And in this case, it looks like trade and transportation is the industry with the highest number of employees. So let's select that here. And it looks like it goes up to almost 28 million, so we can fix our max y-axis value on 30 million. Let's move this to 30, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 30 million. And now you'll see that it didn't change because it was already at 30 million for this series, or for this industry rather. But if I change it to another one, you'll see that it remained from 0 to 30 million. And as we switched our selection, we immediately got the sense that the education and health industry has less employees than the trade and transportation industry, which is a nice touch. What I will say though is that the trend is lost a little as these bars are no longer taking full advantage of the height of my chart. And I'm okay with that. At the end of the day, every decision that you make when visualizing data is some sort of compromise. So you just need to make sure that you keep the end user in mind and that the decisions that you do make are to help them as much as possible. So I'll leave it up to you whether you want to fix the max value on the y-axis here. Now, the natural next question is to ask why we haven't done the same for the line showing average wage trends. In fact, we don't have the max or the min values fixed here. And while we certainly could, we're already showing comparison for annual wages across industries in this bar chart here. So the focus of the line here is strictly to show trend for the current industry, which is why we can leave it as it is. And now that we have set the bounds for our y-axis, we can remove them since we do have the data labels already. But one little caveat here is that I actually really like this axis border being here because it kind of gives a sense of separation between these two charts. So I can't just delete the axis because it's going to get rid of the border. So I'm going to undo. And the good news is that I do have a trick up my sleeve here. We can't delete the axis, but what we can do is make the values on the axis invisible. So I'm going to go to right click and format this axis, and I'm going to apply another custom number format. custom. But this time what I'm going to do is delete this altogether and just add 3 semicolons. And if I press add, you'll see that it basically disappeared these values, and we do still have our border. So how does this work? Well, custom number formats in Excel allow you to provide a separate format option for positive, negative, 0, and text values, all separated by a semicolon. So by just writing the 3 semicolons by themselves and leaving everything else blank, you're basically just telling Excel to display nothing, even though there are values there. So if we do the same for this y-axis, change it to custom, use the 3 semicolons, press add, then you'll see that these values also disappeared, and now our y-axis is aligned between the two. And now we're telling a much clearer story. Granted, it's not really a combo chart anymore, but 2 independent charts. But what we did was leverage Gestalt principles of visual design to make it feel like a single cohesive visual.